So I guess we're about ready to start then. Krista?
I'm so excited. Thank you all for coming today for this great program. Joe Osher, am I saying that right?
Yes.
He's a local author. He's also a talented, sort of our local dog whisperer type person. If you have a trouble pup at home, see this guy because he can help you with any sort of problem pooch. So, I don't know, you might have to spend a few days with my guy, but.
Sometimes it takes a couple of days, but we can usually turn them around.
Excellent. Well, and he's written a children's book about a rescue dog, a runaway dog that finds his way back home, named Shea's Lounge. So let's give him a nice applause.
Hi everybody, I'm Joe, as she said, and this is my first book. I have been a dog lover and dog owner most of my life. I learned about dogs when I was growing up in my family. We always had a family dog, and I always ended up doing the training and spending a lot of the time with the dog. And so I learned about their behavior and how they kind of started to think and work, and what motivated them and what turned them off. And hello, hi. And so over the years, I decided that this was something that I felt that I could work on. And I moved to Florida, and I got into community theater. And one of the directors for a show that I was in asked if anybody had a dog that they could train to do some tricks for the show. And I said, I can. And so I brought the dog in, and I had to audition him. And so I taught him a couple of tricks, and he showed the director the tricks, and the director said, I want that dog in the show. And so that began the career of Shep the Wonder Dog. And Shep and I ended up doing 5 or 6 different shows in Florida. And then I got Shea, and I met Shea when I was doing some research for this musical that I was writing about Shep's life. Because I'd been in musicals, and I thought, well, you know, I could do that. I think I could write a show about a dog who gets adopted, but he gets adopted by the wrong family, and they chain him up and leave him attached to a dog house for about 3 years before I found him. And I convinced the dog owner to let me take his dog and give him a good home. And so I did, and Shep and I became great pals, and I drove to Florida and spent 10 years there, and that's where we began doing community theater, and where Shep began learning his tricks, and where I began learning that I can really change dogs' behavior. And then I found Shea, and when I adopted Shea, I brought her home, and she ran away. And she found a little crack in the fence, and she squeezed through and escaped. And so basically this story is about Shea in the first few weeks that I had Shea. And I thought it was such an interesting story that I wrote my first book about Shea, and I'm calling it Shea's Lounge. So with that, Shea's Lounge is a story about a runaway dog that found her forever home. Written by Joe W. Osher. Shea the runaway was a dog that lived for 2 years on the streets. Every day of her life was a struggle to survive. She learned that eating food out of trash cans could keep her alive, but it also brought her lots of unwanted attention. Everyone she came across was always yelling and throwing things at her. She thought that this was the way dogs were supposed to live because it was the only life she knew. She never knew what it meant to have a real home. She lived and slept on the cold and sometimes mean streets of the town. She was always on the run and moving from place to place. She never slept in the same spot 2 nights in a row. The nights were cold, and the people she met were mostly unfriendly. She believed that this is how her life would always be. One of her favorite places to beg for food and water was the local fire station. The firemen were always happy to give Shea food because they could see that she was very hungry and that she looked helpless and alone. "The poor girl is homeless," said one fireman. "She has a very kind-looking face, but nobody is taking care of her. Just look at how skinny and dirty she is. This poor dog needs my help." So, on that particular day, the kind-hearted fireman gave her a ride in the fire truck all the way to the closest city. The fire truck stopped at the Humane Society and Shea was taken inside and given a bath. It was the first bath of her life, so she struggled and tried to get away, but when she realized that the people scrubbing her weren't hurting her and that she was smelling a whole lot better, she started to enjoy it. Joe was a nice middle-aged man who lived alone. He worked all day at the library, and when he came home, he enjoyed watching television to help him unwind. After a long week, he was settling in for a quiet weekend when a commercial came on TV advertising that the local shelter had lots of great pets to adopt. They mentioned how owning a pet can help prevent loneliness and add years to a person's life, not to mention adding years to the pet's life as well. Joe thought to himself, "I want to live longer, and perhaps I am a bit lonely. Why not at least go down to the shelter and look around? I don't have to adopt a pet if I don't want to. I'll just go and browse around." So, bright and early Saturday morning, Joe drove his car to the shelter and began looking at all the dogs. There were so many different types and sizes of dogs to choose from, but none really jumped out at him as the perfect companion. Joe figured it was meant to be, and so he began to walk towards the exit. Just as Joe was about to leave the shelter, he heard a rather distinctive bark. It was more like a woof than an actual bark. He looked over his shoulder in the direction of that woof, and there, sitting in a cage all by herself, was Shea. He walked over to her cage and looked into her eyes. "You have a good-looking face. You seem nice enough, and you're about the right size," Joe said. Then he asked Shea, "Are you a good dog?" Shea woofed and wagged her big bushy tail at Joe. Joe's heart skipped a beat. Joe knelt down right in front of Shea to get a better look at her. Joe smiled at Shea. Shea smiled back at Joe. Joe decided that Shea was the perfect dog for him. He couldn't believe how happy she made him feel. Shea looked like she felt the same way about Joe. So, Joe adopted Shea. Shea got her shots, her dog tag, and her microchip. Joe got a list of how to safely prepare his home for his new arrival. Joe then bought a big bag of healthy dog food from the pet store and drove Shea home. Joe took a bowl out of the cupboard and painted the name Shea on it in big, bold letters. Joe filled that bowl with dog food and set it on his porch right in front of her. Shea couldn't believe that Joe had given her food just like that. Well, Shea quickly ate every tasty kibble in that bowl. Joe and Shea both realized that they were happier than they had been in years. Joe watched with pride as Shea wandered around his backyard, sniffing everything in her path. After a few minutes, Joe went back inside his home to make the necessary preparations for his new family member. Shea kept exploring her new yard, and after a few minutes, she noticed a hole in her fence. Her survival instincts always told her to never stop and to always keep moving, so she squeezed through that hole and was gone in a flash. A few minutes later, Joe came back outside to check on his dog, but Shea was nowhere to be found. He looked everywhere for her, but no Shea. All he found was Shea's empty dog bowl. Joe got in his car and drove around the neighborhood calling out her name, but he could not find her. His heart sank at the thought of losing his new best friend. He wondered if he would ever see Shea again. After hours of driving the neighborhood, Joe came back home feeling very sad and worried about losing his new dog. As he entered his home, his phone was ringing. To his surprise and joy, it was an officer from the Humane Society. He told Joe that he had caught Shea running in an alley. Joe said Shea must have escaped through a hole in his fence. The man told Joe he could come and get Shea anytime after Joe fixed all the holes in his fence. He also told Joe that some dogs who have lived on the streets for a long time tend to go back to that life because it's the only life they know. He said that some wild dogs can't live the simple life in a home, and that perhaps Shea can never be tamed. Joe went out into his backyard and walked all along his fence line until he discovered where Shea had escaped. He felt so guilty. He blamed himself for not preparing his yard properly for his new guest. For the next few hours, Joe did what he could do to fix all the holes in his fence. He checked and rechecked all the places along his fence where Shea might escape, because he loved Shea and couldn't bear the thought of her wandering somewhere out in the world again, all alone without him. Joe felt his yard was finally ready, so he drove back to the Humane Society and picked up his dog. Joe was so happy. Shea looked happy too. Joe brought Shea home again, and the two of them walked all around the yard. Shea didn't seem like she was looking to find another way to get out. After they had their walk, they both sat together in Joe's backyard, enjoying each other's company. Joe sat in his backyard lounge chair, petting Shea the rest of the day. Joe seemed very confident that Shea could not get through his fence, so the next morning he went to work without any worries. Shea found herself alone again in the yard. Once again, Shea's survival instinct told her to keep moving and to run away. Within a few minutes, Shea found a bit of soft dirt under a part of the fence. With the determination of a trapped animal, Shea dug and dug until she was free. She squeezed under the fence and ran away without a care in the world. When Joe came home from work, he couldn't wait to see his new best friend. He went straight to the backyard and called for her, but she didn't come. Joe walked around his yard to find Shea, but what he found instead was a hole under his fence. He immediately called the Humane Society, but they told him she wasn't there. They reminded Joe about what he needed to do to make sure Shea couldn't get out. Joe told them that he had fixed all the holes in his fence, but that she had dug under his fence. They were disappointed and saddened by his loss. They told him that perhaps he was incapable of taking care of a runaway dog like Shea. After running for hours, Shea stopped under a tree to rest. She thought that it felt good to be back in the wild, living on her own again and being the master of her own destiny. Then, suddenly, a strange feeling came over her. She began thinking about what had happened to her over the last few days. She thought about the man who gave her his home and who fed her, and how she had enjoyed sitting next to him as he pet her. Then she remembered sleeping in the alleys filled with trash and of the garbage cans that would be providing her all of her future meals. Her survival instinct told her what to do next. She turned around and started to run, putting all of her canine senses into high gear. She began to see landmarks and familiar streets and smelled familiar things, so she began to run even faster. Finally, she came upon a neighborhood that looked right. It took her a few moments to get her bearings, but she found that familiar fence and slipped back through the same hole she had escaped from. When she was safely inside the yard, she jumped onto a lounge chair and waited for that nice man who had sat there once before, petting her. She never felt happier in all her life. Her instinct now told her that she could stop running, because she had found her forever home and her place in life on Shea's Lounge. The end. So, that's the story. Do you have any questions? There's one back here. Yes, a little bit was sad, wasn't it? Anybody else?
Oh, I had a happy ending.
I did have a happy ending.
I like happy endings.
Okay, so what we have now is, this is the question and answer time, which is what we have right now. If anybody has any other little questions or comments or anything they'd like to ask, yes?
How long did you have Shea for?
I had Shea for 10 years. She had a great life. We did a lot of great things. We, in Florida, there's a lot of water, and I love to swim, and I love to be in water, and so I got a kayak, and Shep used to sit in the front of the kayak, and Shea used to sit in the back of the kayak, and we would row through the waterways and around the little islands and things that were around where I would live, and we would explore the beaches, and it was very, very nice. And Shea actually got to be in a couple of shows, and so she learned a little bit about theater too. So, any other questions?
What kind of tricks did you teach your dogs?
Well, I taught Shep to bow. He could bow at the end when we all came out along with all the other actors. And in one show, I was a trainer, and I said, and now I introduced Shep the Wonder Dog. And Shep was released from the back of the audience, and he would run through the audience and jump up on the stage, jump up on a little cube that I had, and wave. He would kind of wave and bark to the audience.
Wow.
And then I had him jump over a stick on top of another box and catch a ball. Sometimes he didn't always catch it, but most of the time he caught it. I had him run across the stage one time with a woman's bra in his mouth, with a girl chasing him in a towel, going, "Come back with my bra!" It was very funny. So those were some of the tricks that I had Shep learn. Any other questions? Yes, Kristen.
How long did it take you to write the book? And do you want to talk about the process?
Well, I moved back to Fresno to take care of my mother, who was getting old and a little bit ill, and so I had a lot of time to spend. So I decided that I was going to do a lot of writing, and so I spent a lot of time writing plays and musicals, more musicals, and after Shep died, I decided that Shea needed her own story because she kind of lived in the shadow of Shep, because Shep was known as Shep the Wonder Dog. He got reviewed by theater critics, and we probably did about 5 shows together. So I had Shep first, so I concentrated too much on Shep. And so I kind of felt that Shea got a little bit of less attention. And so I wanted to give Shea her story and make her story as important and as available as Shep's story. So I sat down and I started thinking about what would be the best story to tell about Shea, because there were a lot of them. And it seemed that the most memorable thing that kept coming back was how I had to go and catch and find Shea because she kept escaping. She escaped about 5 or 6 times. I had my phone number on her and her name on her collar, and so neighbors would call me, "I got your dog," or the Humane Society said, "I got your dog," or I would go out and find her. But it ended up one day she left, and I was very distraught. When you lose a dog, your heart breaks and you don't know if you're ever going to see them again. And I could tell that Shea maybe wasn't happy just living with me. I mean, maybe she didn't like me, maybe she didn't like Shep, maybe she just didn't like captivity, living a domesticated life. But she came back. One day I came home and Shea was back in my backyard, and I realized that she must have squeezed back underneath the hole that she had dug under the fence, and she never left again. So I thought, now that's a story.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So if that's, I have a 4-minute video that I want to show everybody before you all go. It's called Shea's Last Bow. Is there audio on this thing, Krista?
No, let me get some speakers really quickly.
There's what?
Let me
Speakers.
get some speakers for you.
Oh, okay. This is a video I put together of some of the times that I spent with Shea after I got her, and then right up to her end. I had to put her to sleep. She got really old, and it was really hard if you've ever had to put down an animal. It's not fun. So, sorry. So I decided that this is a way for me to help me remember her and to help let other people know what a great dog she was and what a sweet dog she was. And here we go.
Work here. Might still be a little quiet, but we'll try our best.
Oh, I think.
Let's see. Sorry, they're all tangled up.
Okay, that's okay. This one.
The green one should go in your machine.
Yeah.
Let me just
Cool.
uncoil them here. This is great. Thank you
Very
so much
good.
for
Yep.
your help.
Okay.
Everyone, Lexi the lab will be here at 2:30 also. So after this, in the children's room, if you want to read to Lexi, the dog, which will tie in nicely here.
Let's see. Uh-oh, that's the one that I want. Why does it keep doing that?
What do I see but a good-looking dog? A border collie, he's the dashingest, smashingest canine around. He's a perfectly handsome hound.
I wonder would she like to chase the cats away, then rest a while together in my den.
I wonder could he love a dog who's been astray, when he hears the who's and what's of where I've been.
Just look at that tail, it can't be beat, and check out her walk. On all those feet, she's the prancingest, dancingest companion around. She's the perfectly dashing hound.
He must be a duke or a prince, I bet he can jump the highest fence. He's the royalest, loyalist canine around. He's a perfectly dashing hound.
I wonder would she like to chase the cats away, then rest a while together in my den.
I wonder could he love a dog who's been astray, when he hears the who's and what's of where I've been.
Oh, what a great face for a pooch, just imagine those chops in a smooch.
He's the dashingest,
she's the loveliest, she's the cuddliest, she's the prancingest, she's the dancing, she's the perfectest canine around.
Whatever we do and wherever we go, there's a song in my heart so much lighter the load.
I'll keep you safe through the day and the night, with the keen sense of smell and the power of right.
And it is sure to come to pass that our first day is bound to last. The world will be a better place to be
when they hear about my true story,
or hum along to any song,
or watch the show on their TV,
or see the play on Old Broadway. The world will be a better place to be. It's plain to see
there's a whole world for me.
A chance to start a brand new life and be the man,
the dog I'm sure to be.
Thank you.
Did you write all the music for that too?
Yes, I did. That was the music from Shep the musical. That was just some of the songs. There's like 20 songs or something like that. But I did that over a 10-year period. So anyway, I was going to put this one up too. But anyway, so if any of you would like to buy a book, I have books here. I will sign them. Just tell me how to spell your name and I will spell it correctly.
What I would like is a
If please stop in and see, like, say, read us right to her while
Okay.
you're
contact.
walking our meeting.
All right.
Hello. Oops, Julia, hold on.
Good. You should take one of those. I have my phone number.
How about we get
Okay, so what's your name? Julia. Julia, Julia. Oh, oh,
That's okay, just, can you put Aunt Allison? Is that okay?
yeah.
Could we get one? No.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, cash or check, either.
How much are they?
They're 12.
Okay.
There you go.
I think I actually have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
How you
Hi,
doing,
Angelique.
Joe? How are you?
I'm good.
That was so cute. I just saw your Facebook thing last minute today, and I was like,
Oh, well, I'm glad.
And you have any money?
I was so glad to see you. I'm like, hey, somebody I know.
We don't
that was
have any
really
money,
sweet. I
but
know, I didn't
want
bring any
this-
money.
You don't have any money?
You know what? We'll get a book from him at the next drum circle or something. How's that? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I don't know why it printed in cash. I never have cash.
I know.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Hi.